Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and in this week's show, I'm going to do a deep dive on the patience of Qui-Gon Jinn. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. We look forward to connecting with you on those platforms then. And also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Okay, everyone, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. Before we get into our deep dive discussion on the patience of Qui-Gon, I'm very excited for this episode. I think I've got some universality themes to it, so get ready for that. We're going to do a quick run of the Star Wars news for this week's show. Just a note, a caveat, so to speak. I'm recording this episode earlier than when I typically do, so Star Wars news may have dropped since the time that I've recorded this episode, and as such, I will cover it next week if new stuff has released since the time of this recording. Only I will know that, but what hasn't dropped. So just be on the lookout for that next week, and understand that caveat. And thank you for your patience, as schedules dictate when I can record sometimes. Anywho, let's talk about some of that Star Wars news that has been released this week in a segment that we lovingly call here Cloud City Gossip. And so far this week, we have not gotten a whole lot of Star Wars news. However, during the High Republic show for this month, which I hope you all watch at home, it's a pretty good program, especially if you're keeping up with the High Republic series of books, comics, and all types of media right now. Fans were treated to a first look cover image for the new book, Path of Deceit by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. And the cover for this new young adult novel features a Pantoran Jedi, a character known only as the Mother, and a new Evereni character, Marta Rowe, for a story that returns us to the planet Dalna to meet a new group, the Path of the Open Hand. Very interesting. A lot of stuff there. Not to debrief on. And I've been keeping up with the High Republic stuff, so I'm very excited for this when it comes out. But we also received some character artwork for the new aforementioned character, Marta Rowe, who will be featured in the book Path of Deceit. Now, she's the same species as Phase 1's main antagonist, Marchion Ro, but evidently, Marta is the polar opposite of the Nile's stormy leader. She's quiet, calm, and collected, a peaceful presence in this era, which is set about 150 years prior to the events of Phase 1. Now, Phase 2 of Star Wars The High Republic will start coming out this coming October. And with that, that's all the Star Wars news that we have at the moment. Stay tuned for the other side of this break for a deep dive look at what I'm calling the patience of Qui-Gon. Okay, friends, we are back. And also, before we get into the conversation about the patience of Qui-Gon, I want to say thank you to everyone who responded to our recent Twitter post about last week's episode, the play and talk for Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. I've played a bit more of the game now. I'm almost through episode 1 at this point, and I am loving it. I hope you are enjoying it just as much as I am. But I put out a poll because I was curious whether you all appreciated the play and talk or not. I know it's a unique way to play a video game, because usually it's a visual medium, but just talking over it can, it was a hit or miss thing, right? And honestly, I got such overwhelmingly positive feedback that I'm very excited to do another one of these days. And I also cannot wait to start live streaming some of the gameplay that I'll be doing here, whether it be an older Star Wars game, Battlefront 1 or 2, maybe even some Jedi Fallen Order. That'd be cool. Lego Star Wars, obviously. So that gives me a lot of motivation and feedback in order to continue doing this type of work. So thank you all for that. I really appreciate that. And be on the lookout for more of that stuff. Subscribe to our YouTube page. We're gonna, once the summer hits and grad school becomes a little less hectic and travel isn't so busy, well, we're gonna hit the ground running with that. So stay tuned for all that. Subscribe to the YouTube page, Force Ghost Conversations, and we'll be hitting that road soon. So now onto the topic for today, which is what I'm calling the Patience of Qui-Gon. And this really resulted as an episode after an experience that I had this week. Now, I want to take you all to my Monday night grad school class, and there are some classmates in the course that maybe Star Wars isn't their first love or something like that. I don't think they have any clue that I do a Star Wars podcast on the side. So they were just kind of discussing and talking about things. And over the course, I could overhear the conversation, of course. And once they started mentioning the word Star Wars and Boba Fett and George Lucas, my ears started to perk up. And obviously, I'm going to be attuned to those conversations more so than not, for better or for worse in some instances. Now, as soon as they started diving in, as soon as I started paying attention to what they were saying, all I heard was negativity about the Book of Boba Fett, about George Lucas. I mean, they brought up the Empire of Dreams documentary, but they were especially harking on the Book of Boba Fett and saying that they didn't understand what was his end goal, what was his purpose. And I had this internal defense mechanism go off within me. I imagine some of you might be at home too, because if you followed this entire journey that we had with the Book of Boba Fett, that character arc that he went on, we did so many deep dive conversations. We're going to continue to have those conversations here on this podcast as we continue and we make more ideological connections across the Star Wars galaxy, right? I think the Book of Boba Fett will continue to play an important and pivotal role in what Star Wars is. So in my head, I'm already coming to the defense of this story. And, in my head, I'm like, well, were you all not listening? Did you not watch the show? Were you not paying attention? He said pretty plainly, I'm tired of these inept leaders getting us killed, and for what? For their own monetary gain. I'm here to break the wheel. I'm here to change things. I'm here to instill a new brand of justice. I'm here to make it a better place. Boba's an idealistic leader. He's there to implement a new strategy, something vastly different from what Jabba, from what Bib Fortuna was, from what the other ruling classes and clans of Tatooine and the Pikes and all the crime lord, right? He's coming in there to do things that are completely different, right? I could have bursted into that conversation at any point in time and just had my words, had ways to tackle all these different plot points and conversation bits and stuff like that they were dishing out. But you know what? I remembered that pivotal scene in The Phantom Menace. The scene that I'm referring to is, just before Qui-Gon's unfortunately passing, is the epic duel with Darth Maul, where he and Kenobi, Obi-Wan, young Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi at this point, are having this gallant battle with this Sith Lord. I mean, they weren't even sure it was a Sith Lord at the time, frankly. In Theed City, they're all over this I don't even know what that area would be called. Frankly, it's like a energy container. I have no idea, frankly. and they're having this like very, very acrobatic and expansive battle. It's so like taxing on their mental and physical strength. They're being tested more than probably they've ever had before, because it's been years, a thousand years, I believe, since the last Sith was like visible to the Jedi before they went away into hiding. We don't know where the Nile are at this point from the High Republic, but we assume that they're probably taken care of and gone. So this is probably a peacetime. I would assume that both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, for the most part, aside from like disputes and problems that have arranged and come up through their Jedi course duties over the years, they probably have had few and far between instances to actually ignite their lightsabers and use them in a combat style that they are being forced to engage with now. They're relying fully on training and honestly just relying on the instincts that they personally have within them at that point. But we get to that eventually, Duel of Fates plays in the background. It's really epic and awesome, right? But eventually it gets to that climactic point where they get stuck in that like barrier, like the ray shields or whatever. Like it's that like corridor scene, right, where Maul's leading him down this path. Maul's stuck in one of the things. Qui-Gon is stuck in another one. And then Kenobi is also stuck within another barrier. And they know that there's like 5 or 10 seconds left. 5 or 10 seconds between when they're going to reopen up again, and then they can run to the next one. Right? We've seen the scene. We all love the Phantom Menace here. We love and appreciate it. It's a phenomenal movie. But something that has always struck me, even back to when I first saw it as a kid, was the complete polar opposites of what Qui-Gon does in that scene and what Maul's doing in that scene, and even what Obi-Wan's doing, right? Obi-Wan's kind of in the middle between them, but Maul and Qui-Gon are at opposite ends of the spectrum in what they choose to do with these 10 seconds of time. Maul is jumping up and down, chomping at the bit to get at these people. He's feeding all off of this rage, anger, hate, frustration, pain that is within him, coursing through his blood and veins. And that's frankly what led him down the dark path that he's on. He can't even sit still. He's just jumping up and down. He's pacing. He's anxious. He's ready to fight at a moment's notice, and he's touching the barrier with his lightsaber. He's getting mad and angry. You can see it on his face. Ray Park does a fascinating and amazing job, I would say, too, of portraying this moment for this character. And what does Qui-Gon do? He sits down and he meditates. You can see the sweat dripping off of his forehead. Go get the 4K copy of it. You could really see that sweat on Liam Neeson's face. Like, that these guys have been in a long, long drawn out battle. More so than what even I would say that the movie only lets you see a little bit of it, right? So you think you have to you put in your headcanon a bit of what fill in the gaps a bit, right? They didn't get from point A to point B, and it didn't take 5 minutes, right? I think that this was a more drawn out affair. At least I think so. You might think otherwise, and that's perfectly fine too. But what he does is he sits down. He meditates. He calms himself. He finds his center. Now that takes a lot of both wisdom, training, and a belief in what you're in the Force, and what you're doing, and the cause that you stand for. That takes a lot. And I really respect that out of Qui-Gon, that he does such a thing like that. It's in many ways, it is the most Jedi thing that one could possibly do. I would argue that in the purest sense of what a Jedi should be, not necessarily saying what the Council and what the Order at the time of his existence is saying, but Qui-Gon may be the quintessential poster boy picturesque of what a Jedi should be. When we're first introduced to him, he's telling Obi-Wan, be in the present, be in the moment, be with the living force. Those are important details to Qui-Gon. And that comes to the forefront in this moment as well. He becomes one with the moment, living in the current present time. He's not thinking about the past. He's not thinking about the future. He is trying to recoup a little bit of his strength. He's living in this grand moment that is taking place before him. He's trying to clear his mind of all the things that could potentially happen. Right? I think that's a universal thing for all of us. Right? We could choose to focus on the things that have affected us and got us to this point. We could choose to linger in the past. We could choose to focus only on the future. I'm not saying don't do those things. Those are important assets to being a human, to being a part of this grand thing that we call life. But at what expense, right? Don't lose the sight of the moment, the currency of it all, the current moment that you're experiencing right now. That is powerful. And the fact that Qui-Gon is patient, he's not ready for a fight. He's ready for a fight, but he doesn't. It's not necessarily like he's begging to do this action. He's not like he's like waiting on bated grip for that for that shield to go away and for Qui-Gon to just jump out and into the battle, right? He's trying to live in the moment. He's trying to be patient. He's trying to clear his mind so that when he makes his next move, he can, do it with the right mindset. And I think that's what I learned from this situation here is I just found myself in that moment. I was like, I could try and attack the negativity. I could let it affect me in a certain way. I could try and shut down all this, like all their ideals about what it is about the Book of Boba Fett, George Lucas, other aspects of Star Wars, right? I could have done that, but I didn't. I literally channeled Qui-Gon as much as I could in that moment. And I took a few deep breaths in and out. I literally closed my eyes and I felt like I was Qui-Gon in that moment. I think literally the thought might have gone through my head as this whole instance and interaction was taking place, and I didn't even interact with them. And in my head, what I heard was, what would Qui-Gon do? What would Qui-Gon do? To be honest, what he would do is exactly what I did. He would live in the present. He would say, that's their opinion. They're allowed to have it. I know what this series means to me. I know what Star Wars means to me overall. I know that I'm a better person today because of Star Wars and of the lessons that I have learned from it. And that shows in this instance that just transpired here. I was able to channel my emotions in a healthy manner. I just breathed. I didn't let it affect me. And I think that it worked out for the better. Because what was I going to gain from engaging in a toxic, non-positive conversation? Nothing. Nothing at all. So as you go about your weeks, coming up weeks, tomorrow, the next month, what have you, just ask yourself the same question. If you find yourself in a hard situation, if you find yourself in a pressure filled moment, if you find yourself being attacked by overwhelming negativity, just take a moment, sit, breathe it out, meditate on it, and then just ask yourself, what would Qui-Gon do? I was very proud of myself in that moment for doing that. And not to just keep patting myself on the back here, but I hope this instance, it just shows that Star Wars is not just a space fantasy opera. If it's just that to you, then certainly, by all means, let it be that for you. But in the same regards, you can also take these themes and life lessons and apply them in your own everyday adventures. right? It doesn't have to just be a galaxy far, far away. It can be a galaxy in your backyard, in your mind, in your home, what have you. Star Wars is what you make of it. It always has been and always will be. It's, as George says all the time, it's it's a show for 12 year olds on the precipice of going off into the world and trying to learn positive themes and not embrace the dark side, be part of the light side, and what does that mean and how it changes for generation to generation, right? But it just goes to show that Star Wars is a universal modern fairy tale that still applies the same themes that we can learn each and every day. Now that's really cool. That's really cool, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all get like similar experiences as you go about your daily exercises, that you think too of like what would Qui-Gon do in this moment? What would Obi-Wan do in this moment? We didn't even talk about Obi-Wan yet. Obi-Wan's kind of in the middle back there. He's like a little calm, but he's a little jumpy, back and jumping forth there. He represents that kind of middle, and I hope that him seeing this moment. If you look at like the ring theory of Star Wars, where like 1 emulates 4, 2 emulates 5, 3 emulates 6, that type of thing. Doesn't really work as well when you bring in the sequel, but like George's original ring theory model of it all, I like to think that he embraced that kind of patience and understanding and accepting of what the future will be, right? I think that's another, excuse me for going back to the Qui-Gon of it all again, but that's something that I really wanted to talk about as well, is the fact that I think he's accepting of the future in this moment, right? If he dies, if he perishes, he's pleased with the progress that Obi-Wan's made in his life. He knows that he's set up for the future. He has a strong belief in Anakin. He believes in him. I think he thinks that eventually the council will see his way in regards to training Anakin, that he is the chosen one. So I don't really think that Qui-Gon has anything left to lose here. I think this is if anyone's going to make a selfless act and lose their life in the name of loved ones, it's going to be Qui-Gon in this scene, which of course does happen. But I like to think too that in Obi-Wan seeing this, that's his mentor, that's his master, it's his teacher, it's the one who's basically looked out for him and been a father figure to him ever since he took him on as a Padawan. I don't know when that was, frankly, but maybe we'll get to learn about that story a bit more in that upcoming book that is coming out, I believe, very soon here in advance of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. But I think in episode 4, when Obi-Wan is fighting Vader and he kind of gives himself up so that Luke can escape and stuff like that, I think there's a bit of like a very similar, like he closes his eyes too. He very much accepts the moment. He's living in the moment, the living force of it all. And he just also breathes and relaxes and accepts what it's coming to be. Like, you can only change so much of the future. As we learn with Anakin, like the future is going to take place one way or another, and we can't change the change as much as we want it to change. Sometimes you just have to accept it and embrace it. And sometimes it's easier if you just accept it and embrace it. Sometimes it's more difficult to accept and embrace things. Look, we're all human. These are hard things that we are faced with. Sometimes daily, sometimes regularly, right? We can't do it all. We're only human. But I like to think that he's emulating somewhat of his former master in episode 4 in that moment. I like to think that there's a through line between their connective tissue and what they've meant to each other as master and apprentice, the journey that they've been on. And of course, a part of him will always be a part of Qui-Gon will always be in Kenobi. For better or for worse, there will always be a part of him in there. And if you look back at it, what Yoda says in episode 4, we are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters, right? That is, in a sense, what is there, right? We are being a true teacher, a person who instills knowledge and wisdom and experience within another person. Like, you are literally imprinting a little bit of yourself into another person, into another. And they're molding that into themselves. They're taking other influences from around them, so on and so forth, what have you. But, at the end of the day, they are where they grow beyond. And I have always found that to be a very powerful quote. We'll do definitely a deep dive on that whole scene with Luke Skywalker and Yoda and the tree. The Last Jedi is chock full of wonderful and impactful moments like that. But I just, and then going back to the story at hand here, I came home from class and I was sharing the story with my wife, and I was like, I had a real Qui-Gon moment today. I was like, I asked myself in this moment, what would Qui-Gon do? And I literally was transported back to that scene in the Phantom Menace where he's faced with probably the greatest challenge he's faced in his life. And what does he do? Is he just takes a moment, he breathes, he relaxes, he finds a center, and then he's accepting of the future that is coming to him. Qui-Gon's a really powerful character, and I think there's always going to be some new things and important things to discuss when it comes to Qui-Gon. His ideas and methods towards the living force and being involved with that helps obviously lead to the discovery of how to become a Force ghost, which is partially, I'm very thankful to Qui-Gon because we wouldn't have a title for this podcast otherwise. But Qui-Gon is a really brilliant character, and I'm glad that George brought him to the screen. Liam Neeson did a fantastic job as well. But in terms of like his patience, like that is a seminal moment. I was actually got through this scene in the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga game the other day, and that was really impactful to me. Is that even still with the Lego of it all, they have a unique brand and humor. We talked about that last week in the pod. And that Star Wars as a whole is that it never takes itself, too seriously. Yet it believes in itself. Lego definitely takes that to another level, and it pokes fun at some of the Star Wars isms of it all. But there's still the impact and the weight of that scene, even in Lego form, which goes to show how universal the concept is. So I challenge you all, as you're going about your weeks, I want you to think about how Star Wars affects your day to day. Do you think of a certain scene that helps drive a motivation or helps you answer a question or gives you a reason for doing a certain activity? I find that I do this quite often, but it might just be because my head is always thinking about Star Wars, and as a moral compass that it is in most cases for me, it's worked out thus far, I would say. But I'd be intrigued to see how other people really are embracing or not embracing the themes that come through in Star Wars. Is it just a movie to you? No, that's totally fine too. Or if it is, that's totally fine as well. Sometimes you just want some entertainment and the pew pew and the explosions of it all. I think that's great. But I think if you're here at Force Ghost Conversations, you're here for these cozy deep dive conversations. You're here for this all. You want to hear about my thoughts on Qui-Gon and his patience and what we can learn from that and how it affects daily life. Especially as people are heading back to the office, return to work is happening, return to office, what you want to call it. Stressful situations are happening all around us, and sometimes it's just important to just take a moment, breathe it out, think about what Qui-Gon would do. So with that, everybody, that is this week's episode of Force Ghost Conversations. I hope that you all enjoyed this deep dive look at the patience of Qui-Gon. I think that's a really appropriate title for this episode. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. I'm sure the will of the Force will decide what that whole episode is, but you'll be very excited for that when it comes out. At least I am already excited for it. So in the meantime, please be sure to check us out on our social media channels. You can follow us on Twitter at Force Ghost Pod. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok by searching Force Ghost Conversations. As I mentioned earlier, get on that YouTube channel, subscribe there. We're going to have a lot more content in the coming months on there, so just get ready for that. But also, if you're staying in tune to our other social channels, you'll probably catch us as new updates come out for that stuff as well. So with that, I hope you all have a great, peaceful, and wonderful week. Again, we'll be back very soon with a new episode, and may the Force be with you all. Take care.